Hi, today's presentation is about GCSE classification. First of all, what do the following things have in common? They're all alive. There are 8 life processes which are common to most living things. See if you can actually name them all. All living things will do these 8 things. They will have some form of nutrition, feeding. They will all excrete to remove waste. They all move in some way, either through growth or through moving from place to place. They will all grow and develop and change as time goes on, and they all aspire to release energy. They will all respond to stimuli, and they will all reproduce. All of them undergo some form of control, either by using a nervous system, or they will use hormones or chemicals. Our key questions are: how are organisms classified as the 5 kingdoms? How has genetic analysis changed our understanding of evolution? How are organisms classified in 3 domains? Can you identify what's in each of these pictures? Which one of these is the odd one out? Well, some of these can be quite easy. The one on the left here, this is your flower. It is a type of plant. We have a fish, which is an animal. Then we have several others which you may not be as sure about. Here, these patches represent bread mold, and bread mold is a type of fungus. Going down here, we have an amoeba. An amoeba is a single-celled organism. The structure in the middle is a bacteria. This bacteria you can tell because it has a cell wall and also it has a flagellum or a type of tail. Not all bacteria have all these things. And then the bottom left, we have a virus. Again, not all viral particles are the same as this. They all have different shapes. But here's a fairly typical shape of a virus. The odd one out is the virus. The first person to use the kingdoms as a classification system was Carl Linnaeus, pictured here. In 1735, he came up with a system known as the two-kingdom system. He first used plant kingdoms and animal kingdom to describe the 2 major classifications. He came up with a system of naming called the binomial system. Binomial system divided the plant and animal kingdom into smaller and smaller subcategories according to their similarities. The smallest category was described using 2 words, and the first word is genus, Homo. Homo is a genus, and sapiens is the species name. So when you put those 2 things together, that's the binomial name for modern man, pictured here on the right. So, binomial classification, and there's a big picture of a 2 there because bi means 2. This is a method first used by Carl Linnaeus in 1735 to help classify organisms. He originally had 2 kingdoms, but now scientists use 5. The binomial part comes from the fact that each animal name is made from 2 words. Remember, a bicycle has 2 wheels, so a binomial is 2 names. This is important because it allows scientists around the world to identify and describe certain species very quickly. There are subgroups to the kingdoms. We're going to talk about the domain theory of classification later. Kingdoms can be split into phylum, class, order, family, genus, and then species. We use the genus name and the species name in binomial classification. Binomial means 2 names. So let's use us as an example. We are Homo sapiens. The word Homo comes from the genus Homo, and the word sapiens is the species name. So if you put Homo and sapiens together, we are describing our species, modern day man. Homo means man and sapiens means wise. So because we're modern day man, we use our brains a lot, so hence the name. So let's start at the top. We have kingdoms. In kingdoms, there are lots of types of kingdoms, 5 kingdoms, and we're going to talk about animals in particular. We belong to the kingdom of animals. But within animals, there's lots of animals. We're very different to a crab, for example. So we are animals with a backbone. So we are part of the phylum Chordata, or chordates. So we're animals with a backbone. And then we can subdivide it even more. There are lots of animals with backbones. So we're going to look at mammals. We are mammals, chordates with fur or hair and milk glands. And within that, we belong to the order of primates. We have collarbones and grasping fingers. And out of the primates, we are primates with relatively flat faces and 3-dimensional vision. So we belong to the family of hominids. And in the hominids, we're upright postured and have large brains. So therefore, we belong to the genus Homo. And the species name is high forehead and thin skull bones, making us Homo sapiens. So because we are different to the rest of the Homo species. Examples of binomial classification. The first word is the genus. The genus is a group of species more closely related to one another than any other group of species. So it's a big group. For example, Panthera is the genus for cats. The second word tells us what the specific species is. For example, a Panthera tigris is a tiger. A Panthera leo is a lion. A Panthera onca is a jaguar. All 3 are cats, but the species name, which is the second word in the binomial name, defines which species this belongs to. So, why is this useful? Binomial classification is useful because it means that scientists can easily identify an exact species. This is useful for studying and also for the conservation of these particular animals. So, would you say that classification is easy then? Well, no, not necessarily. Accurate classification can become complicated for a few reasons. Here are some examples. In the first example, within a single species, there might be some variation within that species. For example, different patterns on the skin, different sizes, or different shaped body parts. In humans, we all have different hair colour, skin colour, body shape, etc. But that doesn't make us different species. That is simply the variation which is natural within our species. Sometimes classification can be unusual and difficult. Ducks are an example of organisms that have lots of hybrids, which are crosses of various types of ducks. And sometimes it can be really hard to tell them apart because they have so much variation and so much shared features between different species as well. You can also get other hybrid animals, so a mixture of 2 different species, and it's difficult to classify them. Ligers, wolfins, and zedonks are examples of hybrids. Ligers are lions and tigers crossed together. Wolfins are whales and dolphins, and zedonks are zebras and donkeys. Another example of unusual and difficult classifications are when you get a ring species. A ring species happen when a single species gets spread out in a circular pattern over a wide area. Populations next to each other vary very slightly, but can interbreed. At opposite ends of the ring, the species have become so different that they cannot breed with each other anymore. Common examples of this are seagulls and salamanders. Here's a diagram to show you a ring species of salamander. What you can see is that the ones on the opposite ends of the rings, a Monterey salamander and the large blotched salamander, are unable to breed together. But as we go round the ring, we should be able to see that the ones closest together are able to breed together. The salamanders can breed with neighbouring ones, but not the ones that are very different, i.e. the ones across from them. Using similarities in the characteristics of organisms is problematic. This is because two organisms may have evolved very similar characteristics, but may not be closely related at all. Just because they have the same markings and the same similar shapes doesn't make them the same species. However, once scientists began to accept evolution, the system that Carl Linnaeus proposed was improved over time. Today, we use 5 kingdoms to classify organisms, but the system is pretty much the same as that in Carl Linnaeus' time. The 5 kingdoms that we use today are animals, plants, fungi, Protoctista, and prokaryotes. Protoctista are single-celled organisms, and prokaryotes are single-celled organisms that we know as bacteria. Here are the main groupings of the 5 kingdoms. Now over to you. You're going to do some research. The kingdoms are listed on the left, and the characteristics I'd like you to fill in on the right. You can use the information sheets dotted around the room to help. Pause the video at this point so that you can go around and do your research. What about things like viruses? Well, viruses are not classified as living things for a few reasons. Viruses cannot reproduce without using a host cell. They have to invade a cell in order to do that. They don't contain the machinery necessary like all other living cells do. They cannot control their own metabolism, the chemical reactions. Basically, they cannot organize the chemicals that form themselves. Now we're going to talk about the domain theory of classification. In the 1970s, scientists found examples of single-celled organisms that had no nuclei, so they put them in the prokaryote kingdom in a group called the Archaea. Later, they found that the Archaea genes were actually closer to those of the plants and animals than the prokaryotes. Advances in genetic analysis showed that all organisms except prokaryotes have unused sections of DNA. These unused sections do not code for proteins. Archaea were found to have unused sections of genes. This led another scientist, Carl Woese, to suggest that all organisms can be classified into 3 domains. Archaea are those organisms that have cells without a nucleus and the genes do not contain sections of unused DNA. Bacteria are those organisms that have cells again without a nucleus, but this time do not have unused sections in the genes. Eukarya are those organisms that are the only organisms to have cells with a nucleus and also the unused sections in our genes, like us.